In a post-apocalyptic world, George Peppard and the guy from Airwolf must team up in a bitchin' all-terrain vehicle to drive from California to New York. Based on the book of the same name, Damnation Alley starts off just before a nuclear war at a U.S. Air Force missile silo. Major Denton, played by George Peppard, and Tanner, played by Jan-Michael Vincent, are two Air Force officers working at the missile silo and are the ones who must turn the keys to launch the missiles when the attack that starts the film comes. It's not explained in the film what starts the war. All we see are incoming missiles that we assume are from Russia and the U.S. response of firing back. The movie then cuts to later on with the Earth having shifted off its axis due to the bombs. Earth's landscape has turned into a desert, the skies are pink, and the bugs have become indestructible. Tanner has resigned from the Air Force, and along with his pal Keegan, played by Paul Winfield, spends his days exploring the wasteland on his motorcycle. Major Denton, by the book Soldier, is secretly working on two armored vehicles called the Landmaster. After an explosion destroys the base, the three, plus another soldier who we don't care about because he will be the first to die, head out on a trip to New York, where they think they might find other survivors. So I first saw this film at some point in the early 80s. I don't recall if my parents rented it on VHS or perhaps it was on HBO. I remember enjoying the film. Being the child that I was, I could totally imagine myself being the hero of this movie. Of course, I only remembered a few items from it. The first was the armored vehicles, and the second was Jan-Michael Vincent racing around on his motorcycle. So when I watched the film recently, I worried that it might not live up to the memory. Have you seen George Peppard in reruns of The A-Team recently? A prime example of not standing the test of time. Often, when I rewatch these cheesy sci-fi films from my youth, I am disappointed. But Damnation Alley did not disappoint. As an adult, I still enjoyed the film, even with the low-quality, aged special effects, the acting, and the storyline, or lack of a storyline. Sitting back and viewing the semi-classic, I still enjoyed it. In Damnation Alley, we get giant scorpions and killer cockroaches. We get rednecks, and best of all, we get a bunch of film cross-processing that turns the skies all kinds of different colors. To be clear, this is not the best film in this subgenre. Most of the film is a series of shots of the group driving. I get the impression that they spent a lot of budget building the Landmaster and wanted to get as much out of it as possible. Interestingly, they are following well-traveled roads that one would expect not to be there by this point after a nuclear war. At one point, they stop in Vegas to pick up a girl who looks pretty good for having gone so long on her own, and they also find a kid on the trip to round out the family. I would highly recommend this film. Okay, maybe not highly recommend, but I would still recommend this film to anyone who enjoys low-budget, cheesy, special effect movies from the 70s and 80s. Yes, the giant scorpions look ridiculous, and the ending is about as unbelievable as you could get. For example, somehow when they arrive in New York, the landscape is green and tree-covered. But the armored vehicle is totally badass, and should I ever end up in a post-apocalyptic world, I would totally want a Landmaster of my own.
This machine can handle a 60-degree incline, can operate in water, has a cruising speed of 60 miles an hour, has 3 separate drive sources, and can operate with either the front or rear wheels out of action.